Oo, sagutin yung laptop mo, hindi rin
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good
Ali, please give me access. Thank you.
Welcome, ma'am. Dalawa tayo. Ta-da!
Okay, we will wait for a few more minutes. We'll wait for maximum 2 to 3 minutes before we begin. For others to join in. Let me check. Okay. Okay. In the meanwhile, if anyone has a question, please feel free to ask me now.
Hi, Ashia, Bina here.
Hi, Veena. Tell me. Yes.
See, I had joined from Unit 5. All right. So I have 4 more units to go.
Right.
So once when I get over with the 4th unit, shall I be able to hand over all the assignments to you? Is that all right?
That's absolutely fine, Veena. If you want to do it one unit before you get done, that's
Okay.
also all right, so that if you need any feedback or if there's anything, however you feel it's okay. Take my email address from Sally, okay? If you want to personally send it to me and, for me to go through it, give you
Yes.
feedback, before you want to do a final version of it, I'm okay
Yes.
with that too.
Sure,
Yeah?
thank you. Because I will be working till the 8th of July. Only after the 8th of July am I free to do all the assignments.
Right. No problem at all.
All right. Thank you, Ashia.
Correct. And, as I said, Veena, the assignment is just to understand and know how much have you, learned, or how much knowledge have you acquired from everything that we've done. This does require a lot more reading. And once you're on the ground, on the field, working with children, you will grow as a special needs educator in terms of experience and your knowledge, all of it. So don't feel restricted. Maybe that thought may come into your mind that I don't know exactly what needs to be done. But my suggestion and advice to all of you is read through the slides over and over again. If you have any concept that you feel that you need to understand better, read about it. There are so many articles, brilliant ones. I keep on reading to enhance my knowledge and to, as I said, to keep abreast with the new changes and trends and all of it. keep reading about it, okay? And only then, and when you practice what you've apply, what you've learned, you will be able to feel satisfied, as a special needs educator.
Yeah, honestly, Ashia, I am stressing out because I have been a TA since the past 3 years. And
Okay.
now I'm moving to the inclusion department from the next academic year. So I'm
That's
really
perfect.
anxious. I'm really stressing out, but hopefully I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, you'll do a good job. You know why? One thing, and I would like to take the credit is here because I've been into this field. I've worked especially in this part of the world, and I've shared so many experiences. You exactly know how the whole department runs, the subtle nuances of it, what you need to be careful about, a lot of things. And I'm sure, if you have the passion in you, you will be able to do a good job. And I think TAs, like how all teachers, I just read about TAs and I said, because teachers need superheroes too. So you've been a superhero. So I'm sure you'll be able to, quickly gel into what you, are planning to do next year.
Thank you so much, Ashia. I feel so much better after speaking to you.
That's the counselor in me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's begin with our session today. Okay, we have, now I know that we have new students today with us, and we're going to start with the first unit. Let me just quickly explain how this whole course and how we've designed it. Now, every unit is a standalone. So you'll learn about one or more new concepts and special needs in every unit that you do. Now, since it's all about special needs, all of these concepts are connected, right? So we always draw connections and make connections and, find ways of connecting our learning so that we can relate everything that we're learning to each other. So today, when we are going to look at definitions, we are going to look at the information processing. Once we've learned about the information processing, we're going to connect it when we learn about disabilities, when we learn about, how a special needs classroom should look, all of it. So we are going to keep connecting all of it. So maybe for a few of you, this is the first one. For the others, maybe it's the second one, third one, ninth one, 10th one. But all these concepts are interconnected and depend on one and the other. So don't feel overwhelmed. I know that students who, if this is your first turn, you may feel that there's too much information. Yes, that feeling will set in. You will feel a little challenged. However, I am going to reiterate this in every session that this is just one part of what you should know in this big, large special needs field. So you really need to keep yourself, as I was asking Pina to do, is you need to upgrade your knowledge by reading and reading and reading. There are materials that if you've, after registration that Sally shares with all students, please read through them, connect with what I've taught you, and then go back and, you can write your questions. You can write your questions via email if you have any. If you think that you are really, overwhelmed with too much and you want to speak to me, I am okay with sharing my number, but only if you feel that that's the last resort. Okay, because I'm also working all through the week. Weekdays are all packed up, but I can definitely take some time out for you, right? So let's move ahead. Welcome to all my new students. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone now, okay? And that's one of the expectations that I have.
Ma'am, you have muted yourself.
Miss, you mute yourself. Just unmute, please.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. So if you have a question, okay, and if you think it's extremely important for you to get that clarification, then you can ask me. Remember, think through, okay? If it is important, if it is relevant, okay? Think of how you'd present it in the best way, and then you ask your question, okay? Please feel free to share your experiences. Again, relevant, crisp, keeping time in mind at all times, okay? So I want it to be an interactive one. I see a lot of you have already opened and shared your screens, and let's begin. Okay, so have I shared the PowerPoint? Yeah. Okay, so can you all see my PowerPoint, the presentation there, screen? Yeah, everyone can hear me well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, brilliant. So let's begin. Well, so today we're going to learn about how learners, or how we process information and we demonstrate understanding, and how we learn by taking in information from the environment, and how do we demonstrate that? How do we make use of the information that we acquire from the environment, and how do we use it to interact with the world around us? So that's extremely important, because it's not just connecting to children with needs, but to all of us. And why do we need to understand how humans process information, and what can be the barriers? So that's something that we're going to discuss about. We will also discuss about some obstacles, that children or adults face while learning, and some definitions and terms that are important. Now, we all know what is disability. If I ask you what is disability, okay, now you know dis and ability. If I break it into two, what does it mean? What is ability? Who can tell me? And in your own words, so I don't want a dictionary definition of ability. In your own words, if you can tell me, what is ability?
Ma'am, can I answer it?
Sure, please. Go ahead.
Ability is something that you are able to do, while disability is something that you are not able to, something like you have an impairment of your
Correct.
senses.
Correct. So ability is, okay, in simple words, that ability is when you're able to do something, right? You have the skills, you have the abilities to accomplish or complete a task, right? And disability, dis is like a prefix, right? Which says where you're not able to do something. So disability, now it could be because of an impairment. The disability could be because the attitude, maybe you don't want to do it. Disability could be because of any reason, not just because you don't have the physical ability to do it, or because of an impairment, but maybe because of lack of motivation, maybe your attitudinal barrier, right? So there are so many things that can cause a disability. So it's important for us to understand that. Now, maybe it's any condition of the body, as it said there, or mind, like impairment, that makes it difficult for people with the condition to do certain activities. Okay, and then it leads to something called activity limitation. And then because of this, the person cannot interact with the world around them, okay, because it limits participation. So if you cannot participate in something, maybe you're not being able to interact with the world around, or the environment that you are in the best possible way, or in a way that will help you gauge more understanding, relate to where you are, and contribute in the best way. So I have a few hands raised now. Sabah, go ahead, Sabah.
Yes, sir. I just want to add that something which I understand from disability is which hampers our activities of daily living that makes disabled in others' point of view.
Correct. Activities maybe of daily living, and restriction in maybe completing or doing those activities. Now, if you look here on this side in my screen, I have a few there are many types of disabilities that affect a person, maybe vision, movement, thinking, remembering, learning, communicating, hearing, mental health, and social relationships. And in our different units, we cover all of these in details. So we talk about cognitive functioning, we talk about learning disabilities, something that's neurobiological in nature, all of this in detail. Now look, if we have to understand disability in a more deeper, now in that SEN perspective or point of view, then what is considered to be a disability? It has 3 dimensions, it says. So one is because of an impairment. Now, what is an impairment? Maybe it is in a person's body structure. Okay, so maybe a person who's on has crutches, or on wheels, or on function. So maybe function of the part of a body. So maybe I cannot use my limbs the way the others can, or maybe any other function of the body, there is some limitation. Or maybe mental functioning. So maybe I have, my brain is wired differently. Okay, it does not function the way it has to understand the world, or maybe as per the norm, that's something that's considered the norm. So maybe it can be either body structure, it can be function of any part of your body, or it can be mental functioning. Okay, so maybe a loss of a limb, vision, memory loss, any of these. Now, impairment is further divided into structural, as I said. Okay, maybe most of it is visible. If it's your internal, then not visible. So significant problems with internal or external component of the body, or it can be functional impairment. That means complete or partial loss of the function of the part of the body, which I've spoken to you about. Then it can be activity limitation. That means you're not being able to complete or participate, okay, because you cannot, maybe you have a vision problem or hearing problem because you cannot walk, okay, or maybe you don't have the ability to interpret the information that you've acquired, so you cannot solve problem. There are some difficulties in cognition. Now, what is cognition? Cognition is the ability to think, reason, and remember. And we all have to keep in mind and keep thanking God at all times that a lot of us don't have a full understanding of how things work, because we are blessed. We naturally are able to do so many things, multitask and do a lot of things that some people may find it challenging to do. For example, most of us are average IQ, right? So when it came to cognitive development, learning new things, okay, adjusting it into our brain, and creating that whole that schema, or the knowledge bank, I would say, okay, we could do it very, very efficiently because we did not have anything that challenged us, right? So we really need to be thankful. And now when we're looking at it, we have to understand that a lot of people who cannot do a lot of things because of these limitations, okay, they are the ones who face challenges in life, and that is the reason they need these special services, special educational needs, and so on and so forth. So activity maybe is the execution of a task or action by an individual. And participation is, again, activities of daily living, as Sabah said, that participation is in normal daily activities such as working, engaging in social and recreational activities, obtaining healthcare and preventive services. Participation is person's involvement in a life situation. Now, for example, a child who has a mild mental or intellectual disability, or who's intellectually challenged, okay? Now, a person's intellectual ability has a huge influence on how the person will acquire knowledge from the environment and how cognition develops, or how cognitive skills grow, right? Your mental ability, your intellectual ability influences that. Imagine a child or a person with low intellectual ability. So we all know the IQ curve, right? We all know the IQ curve. In the middle of the curve, you see our, the IQ is from 90 to 110, right? 90 to 110 is average IQ. Most of us, okay, fall in this average IQ range. That means we have the ability to perceive, use our senses, acquire information, think, reason, remember, and that's how our cognition grows. That leads to us functioning normally in this environment that's around us, in this world around us. Okay, but if I move to the other side, to maybe, if I could call it, the lower side of the IQ, okay, where the IQ starts dropping from 90 to 85, 80, okay, then it goes to 75, 70, and 60. 60 is a range where it's considered to be low IQ. Okay, and below that, it's called intellectually disabled children. That means they do not have, the brain does not have the capacity to use information from the environment, or to learn, or the ability to learn the way the others learn, right? And these children then, have, if I have to look at it in children, these children then have difficulty in acquiring or maybe being able to learn tasks that other children learn easily. And that's where they have to be given specific training for even performing tasks or activities of daily living. For example, cognition is something that develops organically, I've said, right? So as a human being, as you grow and interact with the environment, your cognition is developing rapidly, okay? Whether you've been given the exposure, or whether there is this whole, where this whole planned, where mothers interact with children, there are teachers who interact with children, they get this specific exposure that needs to better development of cognition. But there are some children, maybe in countries, okay, where they do not get this exposure, there is still cognitive development happening. So with exposure, with the opportunities, it's better, right? So it is something that naturally you acquire, okay? When you move out into this world. So cognition is something that's natural, and that is something that helps you interact and function in the world. So for example, through imitation, or when I get exposed to, as a little baby, on how my mom is performing a few tasks, I learn from my mother. Okay, when I look at using my vision, okay, I look at something happening or a task being done in a certain manner, I'm looking at it, and my brain has the capacity to absorb that and to understand how that task is being performed. And then I'm learning, and that's how there is cognitive development. I'm thinking about it, sometimes I'm reasoning, and then I remember it, right? But children who have a very low IQ, okay, all of this, that becomes a limitation. It intrudes into the natural acquisition of, these skills, okay? So a child will not be able to think the way, or acquire, or be able to imitate and do a task, and they need to be taught how things have to be done. So the IQ has a huge impact. On the other side of the spectrum is your children with above average IQ, high functioning children, right? Who can memorize things better, who can understand things better, right? So you always have to keep that also in mind. Now, let's move ahead and see. So it's about impairment, activity limitation, and participation restriction. Now, I have the definition of disability and impairment from the Dubai Inclusive Education Framework also, which says that a need which occurs when student is identified. So what is a disability, and when do you provide a student with special educational needs and disability? When can you put them into that category? Yes, Sayeda. Do you have a question? Saida?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can I know what? Yes, ma'am. It's related to the IQ framework which you discussed. And, hello,
Your
Ms.
voice is breaking, Saida.
I'm so sorry. There's a network issue. Ma'am, I want to know where does the genius IQ start from? What is the range of a genius IQ, which means the next level?
You mean the gifted and talented? The gifted. It's students who are considered gifted. Yeah?
Yeah, maybe the.
Yeah, 125
I understand it
and
could be
above.
around. Yes, ma'am.
125.
Gifted as well as even what? Okay.
So you look at
range. Is there a maximum range? Is there a maximum range?
There is, maybe there is, which maybe I'm not sure of, but I know that Einstein had an IQ of 148. I had a student who had an IQ of 138 and above. I'm sure there is, but then we've had children. But again, you know, when it comes to very, very high functioning, you know, it's always when you have one strength. You remember we spoke about the asynchronous development, right? And especially in GNT students, that is gifted and talented,
yes, because
you know that there's one area that is strong, that is different, where you feel children are gifted, but then there are other areas where there is a deficit, where children are challenged in, you know. So in GNT, you see this asynchrony a lot.
Yes, most of the 130 plus go with autism. Some signs.
No,
most of the cases.
No,
is
not
it that way?
No, but if you look at, so most of the 135 above are not autistic, but a lot of autistic children, if you check their IQ, most of them are high functioning. Right? Like you say that 1/3 of cases of ID, that's intellectually disabled, 1/3 of them are children with Downs, that is Down syndrome, right? Similarly, when you look at you know, the children who are on the spectrum, autistic spectrum, most of them, when their IQ, you know, is tested, when they go for an IQ test and intellectual quotient evaluation, most of them fall into the high IQ category, right? But then you know that the IQ is high, but there are a lot of other areas that fall into the deficit range.
Sorry.
Yes.
My name is Sashira Tosi. Sorry, I enter in the lesson a little bit late. About concerning the autism, the spectrum of autistic, I just a small information. Asperger syndrome is exactly the name with indicated the children or the youth or the people that has from 80 until 120 of Q. This is a syndrome of Asperger. It's not autism. Huh? We have to be very, very, very clear, because autism, unfortunately, almost the 90% of the people that are affected by the different kind of autism are always under 80 or under 70.
Right, but is Sashira, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
No, it's good, perfect.
Yeah, so we have to also understand, you know, according to DSM-5, okay, in earlier we had these different categories where we had Asperger's, and we had this different, like the PD, NOS, and all these different categories that had similar traits, okay, fell into this umbrella. But now all of them are, because they have these core symptoms and core traits, they fall into the ASD spectrum, right? So it is called ASD, even if and we do not now use, according to DSM-5, we do not use these specific names for them. You know, they have done away with all these different names when it comes to autism, and they call it
They've been given the same.
Yeah, but Asperger's is typical because they have a very big and a height capacity. They are very educated
And
in maths,
correct.
they are very creation. So they
There
have specifically the QE is very high. They are genius somewhere else. We cannot
But
consider like
if you
the
look
other.
at, Sashira, if you look at, like, I've worked with a lot of autistic children who maybe do not fall into the Asperger's. Okay, I've worked with a student with savant skills. Okay, now yes, we know that, but there is no one way to determine if that child is Asperger's, and that is the reason why when the new assessment criteria came up, they clubbed all of it together because most of them had these core symptoms. When we do ASD in detail, Sashira, we'll have a discussion about this, right?
Yeah.
So let's
okay,
move
perfect.
on. Let's move ahead and understand.
Thank you so much.
Right, no problem at all. And it's a good thing to have such discussions, you know, so that it gives us more clarity. But a lot of students have not studied ASD in detail. We will do it when we're doing ASD spectrum. That's where we'll discuss about this again. Okay, so let's move on to the definitions, okay, that I've picked from the Dubai Inclusive Policy Framework. Okay, and when will the student be put into this SEN register or that category? Now remember, disability and impairment, they have these two definitions. This document is a document that's available online, the Dubai Inclusive Policy Framework. It's an extremely informative document or a framework that every special needs educator should read, because this will give you a better understanding of how SEND looks or is integrated into the mainstream schoolwork, what the expectations are, what are the requirements, what is considered when it comes to what are the laws around it, the legislation, everything that you need to know, you will find that. There is another book that was introduced, I think, a year and a half later, that is called Implementation of the Dubai Inclusive Policy Framework, which also is a good read. So it's downloadable. You can save an electronic version of it on your desktops, and you can go through and read through to understand, okay, what the expectations are, what is considered to be, and how does this whole thing work in an inclusive setup, okay? So a need which occurs when a student, now here we're talking about SEND in a mainstream setup. So a student is identified with an impairment, okay? Requires the school to make modifications or provide support to prevent or reduce any kind of potential disability. Okay, so you know the child has a formal report, the child has an impairment. Impairment could be, as we discussed over here, structural, functional, which is causing activity and participation limitation. Okay, such children, okay, if they are not provided with tasks or learning experiences that are accommodated and modified to their needs, okay, then there will be a potential disability. That means the child will not be able to function or will not be able to be included in the setup that the child is in. So what you need to do is every school should identify and know that they have children with impairments and make modifications to support in order to prevent or remove completely or reduce potential disability from occurring. And all of this is expected to happen in the common learning environment the child is in. Okay, so the child should be able to access the curriculum that the school is offering. Okay, and how will the child access and be included? By understanding what the child's needs are and then providing accommodations, providing support, providing those modifications so that the child can experience the curriculum in the common learning environment. That is what the need is. So if you come across a special needs child, you need to know, and the first step is to identify the child's needs. Does the child have a formal evaluation or a formal assessment that helps you understand what the needs are, or that puts a finger at this is the child's problem. It is a learning disability, it is a disorder, what is it? And once you know that, okay, you will know what kind of provisions or accommodations, modifications can be provided. Remember, for all those who are doing this as their first unit, we will learn about disorders and learning disabilities. So you will be able to connect this with that. Because when you learn about disabilities in detail and you learn about disorders in detail, you will know what are the common problems, challenges, and traits. So when you know the traits and you know the challenges, you will be able to devise strategies that will help the child function better in the common learning environment, right? So there is a lot of connection that we'll make with what we've learned to what we learn in future, right? So according to the framework, a disability is a social condition. Now, again, it's a social condition. Why do they call it a social condition? What do they mean it's a social condition? I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Marichke. Is that? Yes, you. Sorry.
It's a social disability because it has a lot to do with how the environment, how the people, the community responds to this person. If whether it's a person with a physical disability, that person not being able to access certain buildings, certain facilities, and when it's in terms of cognitive disabilities or developmental delays, is that, for example, a child with autism that has behavior issues, as in my own experience, gets completely excluded from the classroom because teachers are unable to manage him.
Correct.
These are, it's all social. Can you hear me? Actually, oh, okay, good. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. So it's absolutely, it's all about, how society has created something that's called the norm of society and expects people to behave, okay, and function in a certain manner that's acceptable. Who's decided it? We've decided. We've decided what's acceptable. We've decided what's a challenge. We've decided what's right, what's wrong. And all of us, okay, to be called normal, in inverted commas, we need to fit into this expectation, right? And because maybe all of us, and I said, most of us here are blessed because, we are leading a very normal life as per the societal standards, right? We are all doing tasks appropriately. We are not being challenged by anyone, because we are fine. We are, in a way, taking on a lot of criteria set, right? But what about children with challenges? What about children with disabilities? They do not fit into the mold that society has created, right? They cannot pass through. And that is the reason they've called it a social condition. And they said that it occurs when an individual with a long-term limitation. So if the child has an impairment, okay, for example, learning disabilities are lifelong conditions. Why do I say that? Because a learning disability is caused which is neurobiological in nature. That means it has to do something with the way the brain is wired. Now, a child who is learning disabled, okay, to give you a few labels here, dyslexic, dysgraphic, okay, children who are dyslexic, dysgraphic, I cannot take them to a doctor and get a few medication and get it sorted, okay? It is a lifelong condition. When we work with these children as special need educators, we teach them ways to cope, okay, or maybe alleviate their miseries or problems, right? We only teach them coping strategies, coping mechanisms. Their problem is lifelong. You cannot open up a brain and say, let me just look at the wiring and get it all sorted. That cannot be done, right? So this is something that's long-term. The limitation will be long-term. We work with them so that they can adjust better into the mold that society has created, right? So most of these are long-term. So it says that a social condition occurs when an individual with a long-term limitation experiences attitudinal. This child will never be able to do it. He's so lazy. Look at him, it's so easy. He cannot read it. That's attitudinal. Social, that's how we do it. That's what it is correct. That's the right way of doing it, you know? So social and environmental, everyone is writing with that. You need to use the same thing to write. You need to sit right there in the place that I have, because it's not fair if I give you an opportunity, right? That's environmental. These are barriers. So a child, a student, or an individual with long-term limitation and experiences attitudinal, social, environmental barriers that prevent full and effective participation within a community. So it's not just the child's, physical needs or the impairment that's causing it, but it's the attitude, okay, the societal norms and the social norms that people have set, and the environment that causes a barrier and prevents them from, even experiencing and being a part of the community. A disability is a result of an individual's interaction with society and is not an attribute of the person. I think I love this definition. It's written in the most beautiful way. You won't find it anywhere, and that's the reason I've put it here. And all of us, especially the students who are new, you need to have an understanding of this, because you are going to be the flag bearers. You are going to be advocates. You have to understand this. You're not there to teach the child and be all fine and say, he's going to be fine. I have a magic wand and he's fine and he'll have no problems. The child is going to live with it. You have to work on the child's social emotional well-being. Okay, you have to raise his self-respect, his ability to be resilient, his ability to be confident. Only then he'll be able to face the society. So you really need to keep this definition in mind. Okay, an impairment, a medical identified condition or a long-term limitation of person's physical, mental, cognitive, communicative, and sensory function. Okay, so let's very quickly, I will have only 2 students say, have you ever faced a difficulty in learning? Why do we face difficulties in learning? Why do you think? So you're going to share your experience on, have you ever faced difficulties? Okay, and how did you manage? And why did you think that happened with you? Nazia, go ahead, Nazia.
Hi, ma'am. When I was a student, I had problems like I was not able to cope up with math. When it was trigonometry, when it was algorithm, all those things. For me, math, geometry was good. And in science, I was not able to cope up with physics and chemistry. So I don't find the numbers sitting in one place. I find it running around. I do not know what was happening at that time as a student. And then I grew up with this. I came into a point that I will not be able to learn that. Then I somehow managed to pass my 10th and I took commerce in my +2. There again, there were numbers for statistics. So whenever I see numbers, it is very difficult for me. But again, somehow God blessed me and I just managed to pass out the statistics. Then I went for my commerce graduation. Again, I found statistics there, which was very disturbing for me, but I had no option. And I, to be very frank, I took out 3 years to pass out my statistics. From year 1 to year 3, I was running with my statistics together with all my other subjects. And then after I saw my daughter growing up with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia, I saw her saying the same things. Mama, numbers are running around. I can't find it. I can't catch the numbers. Right. So I tried helping her because I saw the movie, a Hindi movie, which is called Tare Zameen Par. So then I came to know what was happening to me as a child. Right. Because I was not able to learn the languages. I was not able to learn like a different language other than English. I was fine with English and Hindi. But for me, learning Arabic and Malayalam, which is my basic language, was very difficult. Very difficult. Right. So, but somehow till grade 8, I learned. From grade 4 to grade 8, I did learn Arabic and Malayalam. But it was like sometimes I do pass, sometimes I fail. But I was not able to do it. And all my family members, whoever saw me, they were saying, you are a fool. How are you doing this? How do you fail in these easy subjects? But for me, it was not easy. And I was not able to make them understand that it is not coming into my brain. Correct. But when my daughter started growing up, then I saw that she has the same issues that I was facing and maybe little, but she was more she was more better than me because I was supporting her. But when I was
Correct.
growing up, my mother was not that much, she did not have that much of knowledge to
Correct.
educate me or support me. So I have
Correct.
seen my daughter struggling with the math, but somehow, I don't know how I managed, but for my daughter, we were trying many other techniques with her counselors and the psychologists who were helping her. She managed, I should say, she managed her math. For me
Correct.
as a student, it was very difficult. I did struggle with math a lot because really numbers were running around. Even still, if my husband asked me, how much did you get balance? If you gave 100 dirhams there, how much did you get the balance? I'll have to sit and count with my fingers because I can't do it. I still can't do
Correct.
it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nazia, for sharing your experience. And you see how, it is so important because, and this, why is this drill? Why do you think I included this in the middle of everything? Because for you to understand that amongst us also, when we have 100 students here, we have students who face challenges like these, right? So it is quite normal. It is normal because we all have strengths, we all have challenges, we all learn differently, okay? And for some, the challenges are more than the others, right? So I'm sure you've heard all of this, and you need to keep in mind that everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. And this is what our education system does, right? So when you work in a mainstream school and you're working with a special needs child, remember when you talk about differentiation, when you talk about accommodation, when you talk about modification, when you change the way the child learns, or when you change what the child learns, you need to change the way the output or the outcome is assessed, right? It's a whole circle. Differentiation, okay, or any changes that you incorporate or implement for a child to adjust well needs to be in every aspect and not just one. So I have beautiful resources to teach the child. I've done this, I've done that, used everything. But when children are assessed in, in schools, mostly it's the same assessment, right? So you need to understand that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will keep feeling and living with a thought that, I'm stupid. Now, what about students or pupils with SEN could have? They have difficulties with some or all school work, difficulties with reading, writing, number work, and understanding information. Remember when I said that we work with children and we teach them how to cope, right? We teach them coping mechanisms. We teach them coping strategies, ways of how they would work. Children also have a natural, again, ability to find these coping mechanisms themselves. They learn how to. For example, a dyslexic child who finds it difficult and has had no support and nobody is understood. Like, for example, Nazia's story, okay, where she may have, when she understood after growing up that there's nobody who understands and would ever believe that the numbers are actually jumping around or the numbers are running away, okay, that's the way she used to perceive numbers. She found ways of dealing with it on her own. However, what about the years where she must have felt being neglected, being, challenged all the time, not being able to fulfill the expectations of people? What about the well-being? What about the mental health of these children? Right? So remember, when it comes to SEN, it's not just academics. You have to look at the other aspects also, and you're there in their life to help them, devise ways to cope with not just academic stress or work, but also how to fit into this society, right? So difficulties in expressing themselves again, okay, a lot of them are very, they lose confidence. They don't know how to express themselves. Even if they cannot gather thoughts the way the others can. Maybe they get all muddled up when they're in front of people, okay? And then how do they do it appropriately? They cannot express themselves or even sometimes understand and perceive. And now when we do the information processing, you will have a better understanding. difficulty in making friends. What about your ASD children who are on this autistic spectrum disorder? One of the core challenge or traits is social skills deficit. That means that they cannot connect with people or express themselves or receive. We all use language to communicate, isn't it? We've acquired language and it's a part of our brain. We use language to express ourselves. We use language to connect with people, but that is where the challenge is. So they cannot make friends. They cannot relate to adults. Okay. They have difficulties behaving properly. Now, who set a norm for behavior? We think this is a set of behaviors that's acceptable, unacceptable. And then when children who cannot manage themselves well are put into the non-acceptable category. So it's not because they do not want to, but they cannot behave in the manner that's considered to be appropriate. In this category are all of our ADHD children, right? Now, the sad part is that all children with behavioral concerns are ADHD. No, remember, it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And what causes a disorder? Again, it's something to do with the brain. So if you think there are 10 children who cannot sit and have low sitting tolerance, all of them have a problem there? No. So you really need to be considerate there. We will learn about ADHD also in detail. Difficulty in organizing themselves, some kind of sensory, maybe they're hypersensitive or hypersensitive, some kind of physical need which may affect them in school. Now, this is an important one here. How do learners process and demonstrate, process information and demonstrate, okay, to the output. So remember, how do we all process information? How do we all take information from the environment? What do we use to take in information? We use our senses, right? We use our senses. Can someone unmute and quickly tell me the 5 important senses that we use to take information from the environment?
Vision, hearing, taste, tactile, and smell.
Auditory, visual, tactile, yeah.
All
your sense of touch, yes, smell, all of those. We all know. So we use these, okay, we use our senses to take in information. So I see something, okay, and it's giving me some information. Or maybe I touch something and I feel it and it's giving me information. Or maybe if I hear a sound, okay, and there's an information when my mom calls out or when I'm listening to a lecture, okay. So incoming information, it remains in your sensory memory. Okay, your sensory memory is, which lasts for a few seconds. I have another slide here which says 3 to 7 units. Duration is 0.5 to 3 seconds. That's how it lasts. Now, the next step is moving to your short-term memory. However, a lot of it is lost. You will only be able to transfer information from your sensory memory to the next level is if you pay attention to it, okay? If you give it some importance. Like even now, okay, I have the ability to only focus on what I'm doing. I know the door just opened. There's someone who entered my room and walked out. I ignored that, okay? I had the ability to ignore it. And my sense of, my auditory sense caught it, but I ignored it. So I have the ability to do that. I can see right, outside the window, I can see there are certain things, but I'm ignoring it. So there's so much information all the time. But then what I do is, if I don't attend to it, it's lost, right? And then if I pay attention to it, I only pay attention to things that I want to pay attention to, right? It moves into the short term. It's also called the working memory, right? And then what happens is, if you encode it, so any information that comes to you, what do? You think about it, you reason, and you encode it. You try to understand it, right? That's how cognition develops. For example, if I see a bird, okay, right there, I can see a bird, black and gray in color, okay? And the prior knowledge is that my mom said that it's a bird. Oh, I know it's a bird. And then I'm thinking, again, I'm looking at that. Okay, the information is coming through and I can hear it making some noise, some different sound. So I can hear that. And then I know that the bird is black in color, gray. And I remember now that my mom had said that it's a crow. I'm looking at it. That's how my cognition is increasing. That means first I thought it was a bird, and now my mom said it's a crow. But I'm paying attention to that and I'm looking at it, and that's how it is there. I've encoded, I've understood it, and it's there in my short-term memory. Okay? And then for it to maintain into the short-term memory, I need some maintenance rehearsal also. So 7 to 9 chunks, 5 to 15 seconds without rehearsal. Then if you do not, like for example, now I've spoken to you all at length for approximately an hour, right? And I've spoken to all of you. You've heard me. Maybe a few things that I've given you example or we've stressed on, that is something that's moved to your short term and maybe your long term also, because that example is something that you've related to so well that you will remember it always. But there are certain things that I've told you, maybe which if I ask you about, you have no memory. Did you even speak about it? I don't know, because you didn't attend to it, right? So you have a stimuli, okay? Any kind, and you take in information using your senses. It remains in your sensory memory. You pay attention to it. It moves to your working memory. There has to be something different, okay? Or maybe you've done rehearsal. You've looked at it, you've researched about it, you've connected something with it, and that is something that will help you. You've encoded it, and that will push it to your long-term memory. It remains in your long-term memory. Like if I ask you about a few things that you remember, few things that has always been a part of your memory, few things from today's session that you think will be a part of your long-term, and you'll always connect it with, because you said that, and because you gave me that example, it really helps me remember. So this is how you process information, and this is where in the whole transition and in this whole process, a lot of information falls through the crack. Now, remember, I've always said, keep thinking about how blessed you are. You do this so naturally. What if you had an impairment? What if you had a disorder? What if you couldn't pay attention? Not because you didn't want to, because you just couldn't. Or what if your teacher is extremely boring? What if she's only read through all the slides and said, okay, this is how you need to do it. This is what you need to understand. One medium, okay? What would happen? A lot of information would just fall through the crack. And what you'd get out of it is very little. And that is the reason why I always stress on, as a teacher, and especially as a special needs educator, when you plan lessons or you plan any learning, it should involve multiple modalities. That means you have to engage the student using different modalities, okay? Using different senses. So it should be something that has to do with visual, auditory, kinesthetic. The child is looking at concrete things, concrete activities, moving around and learning. Because if you use this multisensory or multimodality learning, children will be able to remember things better because they've touched it, they've seen it, they've done it, okay? And you're giving them so many opportunities of rehearsal. Now remember, a child with a normal IQ who fits into the norm, okay, will be able to do it beautifully with all your VAKT, that's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile learning and teaching methods. But you will still have a child who has a learning need. You will still have a child with a disorder who is trying hard with all your beautiful strategies to pay attention, but has a disability. And why is there a disability? Because of the impairment. How do you do things different for that child is what we need to strengthen and learn about. Because we are not working with children who will be able to do things because they fit into the normal category, okay, or do not have too many challenges. Like most children have challenges, right? Children grow up and learn differently, each one. And that is the reason, if you look at the EYFS curriculum, it is designed for the unique learner. So one statement that you will read is for the unique learner. That means every child is unique in his or her own ways. So for you, we need to devise strategies to be able to teach that one student, understand the student's needs, and then be able to devise strategies. Now, remember, I know that, a lot of you may think of what strategy should I use? So if there's an ADHD child, we will look at different AD strategies when we dig deeper and learn about disabilities. But remember, one strategy won't fit all students. I cannot have a plan and use it for all ADHD children. I cannot have one plan and use it for all my learning disabled children. I will have individualized plans with personalized learning for every student who I have identified with a need or with an impairment. Okay, I will have to tweak it, I will have to change it and fit it to the needs of that student, right? And that's how special needs work. It is not about teaching the child separately, one-to-one. It's not about that extra support, but it's about purposeful support. It's about support that's very strategically planned to fit the needs, and only then you will be able to see or make a difference in the child's life, right? So this is the learning model, okay? Some children have processing disorder, okay? Now remember, most of your children with learning disabilities have processing disorder. Now let's look at a student with attention, who has attention deficit, okay? A deficiency in paying attention for a long period of time. What do you think, looking at the information processing model, what do you think will happen? Who can think about? I've kept the slide there, okay? I want you to imagine, so I'm not saying and I'm not labeling the child as ADHD, okay? So we're only looking at the AD, a child who has attention deficiency, so cannot pay attention for a longer period of time. Where do you think the child will reach there? And what do you think you will need to do? I want an answer that's crisp, okay, relevant, and shouldn't take too much time. Yeah.
Ma'am, I feel first the sensory memory capacity will hamper, which result in the lack of the working memory, the short-term memory of that child. As a result, the impairment happens to ADHD child, that he is not able to learn an activity which we have planned him to learn because of the so much sensory input and lack of sensory memory. That's what I feel.
Correct. Can I have this with some examples? I know Marich K. Can you help me pronounce your name? Can you say it once again so that I push it into my long term?
The J is silent.
Okay, so then it is?
Sorry, I can't hear you actually.
Okay, so if the J is silent, how do you pronounce it then?
Marike. Marike.
Marik.
Headset doesn't, if I use my headset, you can't hear me. It's Marijke. The J is silent.
Okay, go ahead, Marijke.
Oh,
can you give us an example of a child who is ADD or AD and help us understand where you think he will find it difficult?
So, by the way, sorry to interrupt. I just realized my laptop was on silent. That's why you couldn't hear me. If I may answer, what I would do for a child that has, what I have done with children with issues with attention, is to use materials and topics that actually interest the child so that I can maintain their attention for a little bit longer. If they have a very strong interest in trains or transport, I'm going to use those interests to deliver my lessons and to deliver the materials. And most of the time, making sure that a child can use their hands, be busy. I'm not going to expect a child with attention issues to just sit and listen and expect them to absorb. That's what I would do.
How Hello, ma'am. Can I add on?
Yes, Grace, go ahead.
Yeah, we all know that a child with attention deficit, it's really very difficult for them to recall, to focus, to even organize and distinguish between important and unimportant, information. That's why the short-term memory cannot carry over another information for a long-term information. That is why it is so hard for these children to maintain and learn something, because from the short term alone, it is already not a proper information. Something that are it's not filtered. It's just that they only can remember certain information. It may not be important, and some are not relevant. So when it goes to a long-term memory, nothing in there. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Grace, and that makes a lot of sense. Let's look at it. Let's look at a math concept. Okay, for example, if teacher's teaching any math concept, for example, addition. Okay, and she teaches children on how they have to, she teaches them single digit addition, and she says that how one number is then added and the sign. Okay, that means add and all of it. The child, okay, in this initial phase when the teacher is explaining, okay, the child focused till the time teacher said 2 digits. So if you have to place 2 digits into blocks, and then his attention wavered away, and he didn't pay attention to the next piece of information, that was this sign is called addition. Okay, it is a symbol when you add. Okay, and then she taught them different words that can be used instead of addition. She said plus, okay, add, all together, and he missed that information. He missed an important piece of information where she spoke about the sign. Okay, so he doesn't know. He knows that 2 digits, okay, how they have to be put together or whatever, but he doesn't know what's the meaning of that symbol that's there. He cannot relate to it. He's missed that piece of information. So what has happened is incomplete information is pushed into his long term. And now he cannot, as Grace very correctly said, that he has information, pieces of information. When he puts everything together, it does not make sense to him at all. Okay, so here in this case, learning is incomplete. He will not be able to do things as expected. And that is the reason it's said that when you teach children with special needs, you always have to do something called task analysis, or you need to chunk a task into small pieces. And after every chunk, you need to assess, and you chunk it and you assess the learner. That's how you teach them. And then you give them, so when you have your lesson plan, you strategically have these, after every 7 minutes, maybe you stand up and jump, or you make 8 with both your hands, or you have some activity, okay, very strategically placed so that you know that the child is engaged into something. You've tested till what you've taught. You go back, you recap quickly, and then you add another piece of information. And then you are sure that that piece of information is again reached to at least the working memory. Okay, when you revise it a couple of times, that is when it will move to the long term, right? And for it to remain into long term also, and for the child to be able to retrieve it when he has to, you need to keep rehearsing with these children. Okay, or there's something called where the memory, the information reaches long term. Okay, but then because it's not used for a very long period, or there's no reinforcement done, it just fades away from there.
So you mean to say frequent questioning to the child with the attention deficit help him to learn, or to make, to dig out or to drag his attention towards you helps? Frequent questioning during the classroom.
Yeah, frequent questioning could be one. Strategic breaks, okay, and task chunking, task analysis. So if I have learning outcomes, I'm going to break them into smaller pieces. And after every objective, I'm going to assess. Give them a break, do another task, assess. Before I start the next task, I assess the first one. So do a quick recap on that. So there's connection made. That's how you work with children, because children with attention needs, okay, a lot of important information is missed at the first step itself, when it's in the sensory memory or when it's in the working memory. Remember, even as adults or anyone, we cannot pay attention after 7 minutes. So the capacity to pay attention is 7 minutes. However, as I said, when I'm processing information, okay, and because I fit into the normal category, I can choose and I can bring my attention back. Okay, I am, and I can do it naturally. I don't have to actually focus attention so much. I know what I need to pay attention on, and I can bring my attention back. So I'm sure a lot of you may have gone back and thought of, what will I do in the evening? What will I do after she's done? What am I going to cook? What do I do? Saturday's over. What do I wear tomorrow to work? Okay, but then you've come back and you've started, you've reminded yourself that you're here. You need to focus on what she's saying, right? So we have the abilities. A lot of these children do not have the ability. So if they're lost and if they're distracted, then they miss a chunk of information that's important, or maybe they do not come back to task at all, because then it doesn't make sense. Imagine if you start with me at the beginning of the lesson and there's no connection for half an hour, and then you come back and you start listening to me again, and you'll feel so disconnected, isn't it? You won't understand what I've spoken about for the whole 1 hour that you've missed. That's something that happened with these children also. Now,
Hi, Ma'am Aisha.
Ma'am, not just with, do we have a question there?
Hi, Ma'am Aisha.
Yes, Grace.
Yeah, I don't know if you have tried with this, but I remember I had a child with ADHD, but let's just focus on the attention deficit part. I remember having the strategy of, I call it train track. So this child is already in her teenage years. So we tried not to give her some cues, but instead we used the train track for her to understand that whenever he has a conversation, he has to stay on track. So we use a train track for her to understand that the topic is this topic. So whenever he goes out of topic, we take away the track. That means it's an accident, it's a failure. So we want him to understand that having a conversation to remain on task.
Right. Yeah. That's a brilliant strategy, Grace. And this is what we do. Like children with attention deficiency, not necessarily that they do not have the ability to learn, but most of them do not perform well because of their inability to pay attention. And as I said, because a lot of information is lost. What do? Is you teach them skills to cope and pay attention for a longer period of time. So for example, at the beginning of a lesson, you give them a checklist, right? And you say, these are tasks that we have to do. As you move on, you need to tick and you need to ensure that you've done all of these, so that there's something that, helps them go back and reflect. This is for, I think, older children, because they will be able to do that. With little ones, again, seating is something that helps them, because the teacher can then, meet children and, tap on their back or on their table and bring them back to task. Maybe teachers here play an important role where they can call out the child's name when they think that the child is not paying attention anymore. So there are various ways where teachers work very closely to help these children focus better.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. I want to, yesterday I learned about the learning theory. So while listening to you, does the constructivism theory applies to the children with attention deficit?
See, constructivism, as far as what I know, is all about, hands-on learning and constructing what you learn.
By the teacher, and the child is, left to explore his, learning by questioning and raising questions. So that could, that might help in the child with attention deficit.
Yes. A lot of these different teaching ways and strategies do help. strategies that will help children stay engaged, strategies that will use more than one modality, multisensory strategies help children, tasks that will engage, and for these children, switch in. So you cannot go with one for a very long period of time. You give them that, a change, and they love newness, novelty. So add in something that's new. So all these will definitely help. Sabir. So for our processing disorders, so we know that, and we spoke about it, we learn about the world through sense of sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Okay. Now we take all this information and then through our senses, it relies on proper functioning of the areas of the brain. Now, in my mind, I'm connecting this to children with a learning disability, or children with disorders, or children who have difficulties in thinking, in retrieving because of the functioning of the brain. What happens to these children who have disabilities or a disorder? It's because the brain, okay, and I've told you, brain is the only unfinished organ at birth. So exposure, all of that after they grow helps it develop, and it develops rapidly in the first 5 years. So they are called the most crucial years in a child's life. However, a child who's born with a brain, okay, a trauma to the brain, or something that has caused a dysfunction, okay, and how will that child be? Despite of all the exposure, the brain will not develop the way it has to be, or something that has altered the wiring of the brain, the neural pathways in the brain. Okay, already it can be a prenatal cause, it can be a postnatal trauma, it can be because of how the mom was and the stress and trauma the mom went through, which has altered the way the brain grew when the child was in the mother's womb. A lot of causes, but this child is born with a brain that is not like how it should be. Okay, and imagine using that information that you've acquired through your senses. It all relies on properly functioning areas of the brain. So a lot of, what is the conclusion of everything that I've said? The conclusion is that your children who have a learning disorder, a learning disability, or any kind of disability will have difficulties processing information. They will have processing disorders. So you see the connection that I've made, right? Most of your children who have a brain dysfunction because of how the brain is, or the wiring, or you call it the neuroplasticity, because of all of it, they will have difficulties in processing information, and they may have processing disorders. Now, the information needs to be processed, okay, stored, and that will lead to responding. If you look at this again, you know, the model that I've put here, and at the end here, I've said, when the information reaches the long term, the way it reaches and the way children use it. For example, in an ADD child, okay, he's got information that's pieces. When he puts it together, it makes no sense. How is the output going to be? The output is going to be the way he's learned it, right? It's not going to be as it is expected. But if another child in the class who's managed to do everything appropriately as per expectation, how is the output going to be? Different. You see? What about an ADHD child? A child who's hyperactive, okay? Maybe who's on the spectrum, who has behavioral challenges because he cannot pay attention, because he is highly, you know, his sensitivities are elevated. So maybe because he cannot look at something for a longer period of time, maybe because of various reasons, he cannot focus attention, okay? And what will happen to him? So you see, the output or the response will all depend on how the child has processed all the information that the teacher has given. And remember, behavior is the outcome of how the child feels, okay? Or how the child has been able to cope with whatever he's expected to do. So imagine that child who's ADD. How is his behavior going to be after all this processing? How is the behavior of a child who's on the spectrum going to be? All, feeling all demotivated, or maybe, attention seeking, negative attention seeking, or maybe acting as if he doesn't know, like it will all show on the behavior. So the way information is processed and the difficulties that children face, it is going to have a huge influence on how the response, behavior, and output is going to be. Right? Do you see the connection here, all of you? Yeah. So this is how it's going to be. Information processing deficits, where you input that's taken information, you're processing it. So when you're processing it, it's a whole thing of going from your sensory memory to your short-term working memory to your long-term memory, and that will have an influence on how the output is going to be, and that's going to translate into the actions. Okay, so if you wonder why an ADHD child behaves in the manner he's behaving, is because of the difficulties and challenges that he faces, right? How is a smart, motivated child behaving, and how he fits into all the criteria that you've set is because of the way he's processed, and he's felt successful. He's felt so accomplished. He feels he's been able to do things that he had to. So you see how your output, response, and behavior relies largely on your ability to be able to take in, process information, okay, and to be able to be successful at that.
So
okay?
it is of the attitudinal, your input affect the child with attention deficit, the teacher's attitude.
Definitely, yeah. Teacher's attitude will definitely impact the child. And from the beginning, okay, teacher's attitude, sometimes teacher's attitude can be the biggest barrier, where teacher feels that she doesn't need to do things because everything is all right. You're just acting up, you're just doing it. So in a mainstream, it is the teacher's responsibility. And if you all, decide to go back and move to and be a part of the mainstream, then you need to spend 50% of your time empowering teachers and working with them closely. And the 50% you have to spend with children, okay? Working on their socio-emotional needs, 25, I would say, and 25 is teaching them ways to cope, right? That's how you have to. Because in a mainstream, they're going to spend at least more than 75% of time in the class with their teacher. So she needs to know what needs to be done, because they can have a huge impact on how children grow up and how confident they grow up to be. Okay, so what is an information processing disorder? It's a deficiency in a person's ability to effectively use information. Okay, and it's not a result. Like how I said, learning disability disorders, okay, is not because the child has a hearing loss or impaired vision. Okay, it is neurobiological. That means something to do with the child's brain. Similarly, a deficiency here, okay, or information processing is not because the child cannot hear, or a hearing loss or impaired vision or ADHD or any kind of intellectual cognitive deficit. Okay, it is where the child is unable to use information. Now, two important and critical areas are visual processing and auditory processing. Okay, the others are also there, but these are the most important. Disorders in one or several of these areas of processing can affect academic success. Now, the other slide we will have to pay a little attention to, where I have gathered and put some information on visual processing and some on auditory processing. Now you have to remember that at all levels and any time and at in class, children are focusing on, and we as humans are focusing on so many things, and we are multitasking at all times, right? And you will know when we talk about, so if I tell you visual processing, what will come to your mind is looking at things, gathering information, or taking information and processing it. But you see, there are so many skills that you require to visually process information. And that's what we are going to look at in the next slide. Okay. So what all, next slide, sorry, I have another one which will give you some more information. Now, if cognitive functions are not working, okay, complex, many areas of learning and function are disrupted. What does this mean? Okay, what is cognitive function? I said it's thinking, reasoning, and it is remembering. And it helps you do the basic tasks in life, you know, basic like brushing your teeth, right? From brushing your teeth to the most complex one, driving a car. To me, I think the most complex one is to drive a car, because it really requires you to do so many different, you need to pay attention, you're using your muscle memory, you are paying attention, you're looking at things, you're doing so many things when you're driving a car. So I think that's the most complex cognitive task that, I feel I do. So it is about thinking, reasoning, and doing things, okay, to be able to complete a task, okay? So if you cannot do that, okay, if you cannot, if that doesn't function properly, then many areas of learning and functioning are disrupted, okay? And in a class, you need to understand. So if a child is not being able to learn, you need to understand where is the problem. Is it because of the child not being able to process information properly? Okay, and then proper accommodation should be provided. Now, information processing disorders are not often named. So like how we say dyslexia and dysgraphia, okay, an information processing problem will not be named as a specific disability, but they're seen in many individuals with learning disabilities. For example, a lot of children who are dyslexic, who have problems with reading and writing, okay, have difficulties with visual discrimination. Like when they are processing information visually, they find it difficult to discriminate between. So if they're looking at two letters, which are symbols, A and B, they find it very difficult to process it when they're looking at it and discriminate between this is A, okay, the symbol, because the bump is on this side, and this is B, because the bump is on the other side and there's a long line there. So visually, they find it very difficult to discriminate between symbols. So information processing will not have a specific type. It won't be named as a specific disability, but many individuals with learning disabilities you will see that they have these difficulties or processing disorders. And the inability to process information can lead to, again, frustration, low self-esteem, social withdrawal, okay? And especially when speech and language impairments also exist, when they're not being able to express themselves because of a speech and language need. Okay, so here a very quick one, and you read through.
Ma'am, can I ask one question here? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Ma'am, as you said that visual problem, like when the child is having the habit of writing in the left hand, in that case, if you are writing B or D, so yeah, they can understand how they have to write it. But how can we teach them? How can we make them understand the child, those who are writing with the left hand? Will it affect their memory, or will it?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, a left hand and right hand dominance has nothing to do with whether they will be able to learn the orientation of letters, or you will find it difficult to teach a left-handed how letter orientation and all of it. You use the same strategies, Suvarna. You use the same strategies to teach them. For example, when we work with dyslexic children, you teach them with, you use this for the and right? You have such strategies. You can use it with a left-handed or a right-handed student. I think that does not make any.
Because a child with me, she feels very difficult whenever I'm writing on the board, or I don't know how to teach her, how to make her sit near to me or in front of me, or where or behind her I have to sit and I have to hold her hand and write. How to make that it? Like to make
have you attended the session where we discussed dyslexia and strategies that could be used? if this is your first session, then maybe Suvarna, you take in what we're talking about today, and then we will do that in detail.
Oh,
Right?
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So now this is where I've put this, this table, okay, and it gives you an understanding of when you're visually processing information, look at everything that you're doing, processing areas, and if you look at what skill and what difficulties are observed, right? So if you look at visual discrimination, as I said, using the sense of sight and comparing things and features to distinguish, like I said, a and b, like the k and another letter, where you can discriminate, or where you look at different patterns and you can discriminate. Similar difficulties with students who have difficulties in math, mostly discrimination in symbols. So looking at different numbers and understanding, you have to know that all these, the alphabet, okay, or if you look at numbers, these are all symbols. We've given them meaning. We know that something that's written this way is a 2, okay, and we know what value it has, okay. However, and we know that how 2 is different from a 4, or how 2 is different from a 3, because we can perceive and discriminate. But children who have problems, like Nazia will understand this, who have problems looking at and perceiving these letters correctly and processing them, will not be able to see 2 the way you see 2, or will not be able to distinguish a 2 from 4 because of the way they perceive it. So again, visual processing, just not about looking at things, being able to process it, ability to discriminate, which very naturally we've learned, and we don't understand that it can be difficult for children with disabilities. Visual figure ground discrimination. What is the meaning of figure ground? I am looking at a lot of things. How many of you have, worked on that puzzle, completed that puzzle where you have find the difference, or find 5 things, spot the difference, right? Where you have to focus on where there are so many things, and you have to focus on little things and see where the difference is. That's figure ground discrimination, discriminating a shape or a printed character from its background. Okay, where I can focus on, and I can only focus on one thing that I need to see, and I can then discriminate it. Okay, so if you see, I have also in the table put for all of you to read, and these are slides that I've added, okay, which I think will really enhance understanding on visual and auditory processing and how it has an impact on students' learning. So the first one is discrimination. I told you about letters and numbers. Figure ground is where bit of information on a printed page. So imagine a student who is dyslexic, who finds it difficult to read, and you've given them a huge text, and you say, page number 134, 4th line, start reading from there. I do not know what you're talking about. Okay, I cannot process it the way you've processed it. I cannot see the letters the way you're seeing letters, right? It becomes very difficult for them to spot what you're talking about from all of it, because for them it's a sea of letters and words where they are all lost in their mind. Maybe all of them are running around. I remember my nephew used to tell his mom, who's a dyslexic, that I see elephants walking. Can you see, mom? And his mother used to feel that he's fooling me. You know what? He's fooling me. Until when she decided to learn about special needs, she studied, and now she knows how children see letters jumping and moving. And the movie that Nazia spoke about, it's a Hindi movie, and I don't know how many of you understand Hindi, but if you could see it with the English translation, it's a brilliant movie. I think you all should go and watch it. It's called Tare Zameen Ke. That means stars on the ground. Yeah, I think you all should watch it. It's a beautiful movie, and it will really enhance your understanding of children and how they face and how societal pressure really works on them. I think, it always, even today, I can watch it and it really makes me extremely emotional. So that's a good share. So again, visual sequencing, the ability to be able to distinguish and then sequence. Again, a child who has difficulties reading, Letters are put in a sequence, and only because letters are put in a sequence, you club them into a word, and then you make sense of it and you read, like what, okay, W-H-A-T. It's in a sequence. You've read it in a sequence. It makes sense because you are calling it what. But I am a child who cannot perceive what. I perceive it as W-A-H-T. And then what is W-A-H-T? I'm going to wonder what W-A, and I cannot read it. And the teacher may feel, how stupid. I mean, it's so clear. Why don't you look at it, read it again? And what do you teach children when you teach children who are dyslexic? Look at words as a chunk. Do not break them. Like, these are different strategies where we discuss this in detail when we do dyslexia. But this is how this is, when you process, you need to be able to visually sequence, which we are blessed. We can do it so easily. Visual motor processing, using feedback from the eye to coordinate the part of movements. You know, the eye-hand coordination, when you're writing, you know what you're seeing, and your eyes, you know, they also move along, right? So that's coordination. When a ball is thrown or anything that's thrown at you, you quickly coordinate and you move your hands to prevent yourself from being hurt, or in order to catch the ball. That's visual motor processing. Now, children will have difficulties writing within lines or margins. Okay, there was a child who could never ever see a margin line. I used to take a big thick marker and I used to draw thick lines. Despite of that, he used to start writing and it used to automatically just carve in like this. And at the end of it, he used to have only 3 words in that last 3 to 4, and it used to reduce. And I used to always tell him, because he couldn't perceive it. That's how he could see the paper. He couldn't see it. And then we may all wonder why, but that's how his brain is wired. He's different, right? So again, then visual memory. Okay, now there is visual memory again is long-term visual memory, to recall something seen some time ago, and short-time memory is to ability to remember. Copying from the board. Okay, how many of us have to see word by word and then write? And how many of us just read a line and then write it because it's in my memory? What about learning spellings? Does it require visual memory? Yes, it does. Learning spellings, to have a memory of the word that you've seen and to be able to write it. You know, in a lot of children with reading and writing and spelling difficulties, you strengthen their visual memory. You work on their visual memory. You teach them through flashcards. Okay, flashcards. I remember working with a dyslexic child, and I used to have these flashcards with different pictures on them. So like if I have a hat, I had her wearing a small hat. I used to draw it. You know, if I had a syllable or if I had a vowel that they had to stress on, I used to draw something around it, and that enhanced their visual memory. So every time they thought of that word, they used to think of and, you know, relate it to the picture that I had made. You know, these are strategies, and I didn't use it for all. There were specific children who I used it for. So you need to enhance visual memory. What about visual closure? What about if I show you BECAU, okay, and I hide the other? Who can complete it? BECAU. Who can complete it?
Because,
right, visual closure. If I show you, you know what's there. If I show you the tail or the back portion of an elephant, okay, the backside of an elephant, just that, you know what's there, right? If I show you half, you know what's the other half, right? So that's visual closure, because again, your memory, what you've seen before, you're retrieving it from your long term and you're making sense of it. So imagine, can you imagine, there are so many things you do when you're visually processing. How many of us have sat and actually thought of all of this, right? We don't think of it because it's so natural, we do it. I mean, we're blessed with doing it so easily. We don't have the time to think of whether we, but if in Nazia's case, if I ask her, she will think of how she found it difficult to discriminate, how she found it difficult to do a lot of things that we all do naturally. So when I talk about visual processing, it's just not looking at things and easily gathering information. It's about all of these, right? So when you're planning your lessons and when you work with children, think of these. I want all of you to print this slide, especially keep it in your kit. You know, I always speak about you all should have a special educators kit. Keep this. You know, you have to keep reading. Some information you really need to keep rehearsing, recapping, reading, so that you have an understanding. When you're working with children, okay, and you see that the child is not being able to distinguish between letters after he's seeing, you know that maybe he has a difficulty in processing. You're not going to jump to a conclusion and say, oh, he has a visual processing disorder, but you're going to give him more ways to assess him. And if he does, then what is it that you need to plan for him if he has a processing disorder, right? Let's move to, okay, again, spatial relationships. Okay, now you know without seeing, because you have the sense of proprioception, that if I keep a chair, I've looked at the chair once, I can go and sit on it and land on it correctly. How many of you have missed the chair and fell off because, you know, you just couldn't understand and have that spatial understanding of where the chair is placed? Or maybe when you're walking, you go and bang into something. How many of you feel that there are some children who are so clumsy, you know, keep banging and keep falling and keep, you know, cannot? Now that's spatial awareness. That's being able to understand where objects are positioned and to have that estimation of, if I walk from here, maybe I'm very close to this, or maybe I might bang into this. Now, again, so naturally we walk. If you have to walk on a pathway, if you have to walk on a line, if you have to walk, you do it so well, you know, because we don't have a problem, but a lot of children have difficulties. So ability to understand how objects are positioned in space in relation to oneself. This involves understanding distance or estimation. Again, something and a skill that's required in math. If I have two glasses, for example, I know of a dyslexic student who said, my mom always asks me to, at the end of, towards the end of the day when we're done with dinner, she says, why don't you empty food into different containers and put them in the fridge? And she said, I always use wrong containers. I don't know what to use. She's dyslexic. She doesn't understand that this will fit into that. You know, that basic understanding that we have. So moving to auditory discrimination, okay? Again, now everything that we do visually, ability to do it when you hear. Like, for example, you're learning sound symbol association, okay? You look at a sound, okay? And you hear the sound and you can, you know, associate sound and symbol. And that's how you create meaning. And that's how you say, you understand that this is A, which says a, and it's used in and, right? That's the connection that you make. So the ability to notice, compare, and distinguish and separate sounds in words. This is extremely vital for reading, isn't it? Where you can understand words individually, blend them into words, and after you blend them, you read the words. And once you've read the word, you comprehend the meaning of it. And reading, why do you read? You read to comprehend. You read to understand, right? And only if you are able to make understand and put meaning to it, you will be able to be successful in the activity, the reading activity that you're doing. Okay, so difference between similar sounds like 70 and 17. Okay, sometimes you find it very, like, I always feel that I have difficulties processing information, auditory information, and I find it difficult to understand accents. You know, if somebody speaks very fast, I find it very difficult to understand, and I have to ask them to slow down, please, because when I am saying it, I am very, you know, being more articulate in the sense that 17 and 70. But if I say it fast, 70, 70, maybe you don't understand it. So the whole ability to process that is also, you know, auditory discrimination is about that. Understanding spoken language, following directions and remembering details. Figure ground again. What is figure ground? I told you while speaking to all of you, I had sounds in the background, right? Somebody opening the door, somebody banging something, something fell, the doorbell, all of it. But now, ability to discriminate, okay, and understand what is it that's important. The ability to pick out important sounds from noisy background. Distinguish meaningful sounds from noisy backgrounds, staying focused on auditory information being given, and for example, in classes, following verbal directions. Okay, auditory memory again, two kinds, that's long term and short term. And to be able to retain something that you've heard, to push it into your long term, and to be able to retrieve it. And auditory sequencing is the ability to understand and recall the order of words. Okay, here where a lot of children get confused with multi-digit numbers, 74 and 47, because of visual also, and because of how they process it and perceive it when it's said to them. You know, when you look at all these standardized assessments used to diagnose learning disabilities, these are subtests. Visual discrimination, auditory discrimination, figure ground, these are all subtests. And these are administered and you know, to see how children perform on each one. And then there is a score that's prepared. So these are all subtests and used to determine if the child has difficulties processing, or maybe that's causing the child not to be able to read or write. So that's all about our processing, right? A lot to remember. I want you to keep these slides, okay, and the information processing model, print the information processing and these two, and always keep handy, okay? There's a lot of information that you will use and you will have to think of when you learn. And for all those who've been with me, okay, try connecting it with what we've learned. Okay, so how does it impact visual processing in a dyslexic student, visual processing in an ASD student, visual processing in a child who is mildly intellectually disabled, or maybe Down syndrome, right? We need to make these connections. Now, common barriers to learning in school, we've discussed about motivational. So it's not just about not being able to, but lack of motivation, ability to learn, could be barriers to emotional. Okay, when they know that they cannot connect with teachers, no motivation from parents. Okay, they always have, you know, faced failure, have not been able to perform to as per the expectations of others, and that has really had an emotional you know, an impact on their emotional well-being, and that's something that can really be a barrier. Then physical barrier we've discussed, environmental we've discussed, social cultural barrier, maybe, you know, because you can only study, girls can only study till this age, boys can only study, boys have to do this, girls have to learn you know, medicine, they need to go into this field. A lot of cultural aspects also that can be barriers. Processing difficulties I've discussed in detail, one of the most important aspects when we study special needs. So keep that and remember that well. I want each one of you, after the session is over, for the whole week or for the whole day, at least today, if you have time, to dwell, to read and reflect on it further, right? Product difficulties is outcome, okay? How they've learned, and I've said, you know, a lot of times teachers differentiate, but only the content and process and not the output. Okay, that's where children have, that becomes a barrier. Home related issues, educational system related. Okay, now who can reflect on this picture? Who is this? Maybe it's you, or maybe it's, this is how you look when you become a special needs educator. Who is this, and what do you think this picture? I want you to reflect on it.
This can be me.
Okay, Nazia, it can be Nazia. She's looking at her as someone who has so many difficulties. This picture here that I've put is a picture of a teacher, and this is how our teachers feel.
Teacher feel, yeah.
Most of our teachers feel this way. You know, because again, society, our educational systems, a very fixated way of how they need to run, what they need what children have to accomplish, and this is what makes teachers feel like this. Like teachers always have this thought of, I don't have enough time to do it. I have 20 children. How do I cater to the needs of all 20 in my class? I mean, that has to be a joke. I don't think I have the time. I have so many documentations to complete. I have other children. If I only focus on this child, what do I do with the others? Also, the next one is I need to teach using the textbook. Okay, this is the textbook. I need to use this. I need to complete this because the curriculum and its demands, this is how it has to be done, the right and wrong of the curriculum. I need to teach to the test. I need to test them all and see how much they attain, okay, what their scores are. And that is the reason I cannot change, I don't have enough resources. I don't know how to create resources. And I think this is an expensive affair. Special needs, oh my God, it really needs so much more. I need more training. I don't know what needs to be done. I think the expectations are too high. I don't know, and I'm not a specialist. I've not done a course like how you've done. I might lose control of the class if I focus on one. How do I need to do that? I've always been successful, attitudinal barrier, where you have a fixed mindset of, I've been successful. If I look at the ratio, more than 50% of students in my class learn this way. And I think that's good enough to measure success. So these are barriers that you may come across when you work in a mainstream setup. And what you need to do is, again, it's not just about working with that one child in your class. It's about how you would look at helping the child accommodate in class and helping teachers develop an attitude that will help children function better. So it's about empowering teachers, okay, upskilling them. And it's all about drilling into them that every teacher is a teacher of SEND. The SEND student belongs to the class and is a part of your class and is not a part of the SEND list register and the SEND team. These are attitudes, and this is something that you need to work towards. But, because I've been into this field for a very long time, I know that a lot of times as SEND educators also, we really restrict ourselves. And if we don't teach skills and create this awareness and empower teachers and educate them, we will never have this successful bond and relationship that's required to work with children. So always support them, okay? Work with them, collaborate with them, and your level of patience has to be always higher than what they have to be able to. And of course, you know better than what teachers know. So this is how teachers look and how they feel. Early signs of interventions, we know that in early years, okay, these are 7 domains, but let's look at the 4 important domains that I've spoken to everyone about, and I speak to people about and my students about in every session is the 4 important domains of growth and development that influence learning is your communication and language, okay, where speech, communication and language, your cognitive skills, okay, your physical development, okay, so your speech, communication, and your socio-emotional. These are important aspects. And when children grow, and these are in a way domains that work together. So as children develop, you need to focus on how children are developing. Are they on the correct developmental pathway? Do they have any challenges? So is speech a problem? Is the child acquiring language the way that the child should? Is the child okay with, does the child have any physical impairments? Or if not, how is it with the gross and fine motor skills? Okay, what about socially? Can the child interact socially well? These are aspects that we as special needs educators should observe in children to early identify and intervene, because early identification and intervention is a key to success in these children. So again, broken down, those 4 are broken down into spiritual, moral, language, cognitive, physical is broken into fine and gross motor, self-help, adaptive skills, and emotional skills. And you need to at that level. So what is early? What do I mean by early? Early is 3 years, okay? But at least if you remember that children have this developmental window from birth to 5, you have that much time. So any identification that's done before 5 years, okay, before 3 years is extremely good. But if not before 5 years, the child will be able to learn different skills and ways to cope better and easily. So these are children. So you have to identify your children who are at risk. Common special needs, learning disabilities such as dyslexia, communication disorders, all of these we will learn about. Okay, physical disabilities like osteogenesis imperfecta, that's brittle bone disease, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, spina bifida. I've added the explanation there so that when you refer to it, you know what it is. Ataxia, that is group of disorders that affects coordination, and developmental disabilities. We will learn these all in detail. What do you think? Gifted and talented is a part of special needs? All those who've studied will say yes. So I see them all nod. The GNT, yes, it is a part of children who need special educational, who have special educational needs. Okay, and this will be handled separately. We have a full unit where we study about gifted and talented, the asynchronous development, and why they are a part of the special needs register. Definition according to IDEA, we've looked at few other definitions also. What is special education and what are the different definitions? Also known as special educational needs, aided educational, exceptional education. Special ed is a practice of educating students in a way that addresses their needs, differences in needs. So it's all about how children learn differently and how their needs are taken care of. Okay, this process involves individually planned. So now we talk about the IEPs. So once you've identified their needs, okay, you plan IEPs that are planned, systematically monitored. Teaching procedures are different. Adapted equipments are used and materials, and you have a setting in which which is accessible. Then we look at these interventions are designed to help individuals with special needs to achieve a higher level of personal self-sufficiency and success in school. Now, it is opposite to special needs, is opposite to general education. Now, this is special education in a special education setup. Is different and opposite from general education. General education is a standard curriculum presented without special teaching or methods. Students receiving special education services can enroll in general education setting to learn along with other children. Okay, then a special education is designed specifically for students with special needs, which could be due to an impairment, a limitation, everything that we've discussed. Remedial education can be designed for any student. So what do I mean by this? A remedial education, a lot of times it's used with children who have special needs. But even if a child has a lag in studying because there was a medical condition, the child has missed studies, you can have remedial sessions with the child to fill in the gap. Okay, so not because of a disability, remedial education can be designed for any student who's had a lag in learning due to any reason, okay, with or without special needs. Then there's something called response to intervention, okay, and cascade of services depends on from mild to severe. Now the other one, the tiers of support is used in a general ed classroom, okay, where you see the different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And the other one is cascade of services used in a special needs classroom based on the difficulty. For example, if you have a child who is who has Down syndrome. Okay, so in Down syndrome also you have children. Again, the IQ is on a spectrum. So children with very, very low IQ, okay, that is 35, 40, who will need more support, okay, can be in hospitals, homebound school. You see, it moves from severe to mild, right? Some of them will be okay in a special day school, some of them in special educational centers, special classes, so on to mainstream, okay, to maybe a teacher who moves around, visits their home, teaches them, to mainstreaming. So depends on that. On the other hand, if you look at the tiers of support, the response to intervention tier, it is from tier 1, 2, 3. It's also called waves of support, okay, waves of intervention in a mainstream, where tier 1 will be your most number of students will be on tier 1, okay, where they can, through quality first teaching and co-curriculum and with some support from the teacher, will be able to manage in a classroom setting. The tier 2 will be targeted small group, where you pull out children and you work with them in small groups. You strengthen their skills, you work on deficit areas, and then you push them back into the mainstream. And then that's how you translate and what you've worked on into the mainstream. And then tier 3 are children with severe needs, okay, in a mainstream, who need maybe a learning support assistant, who need intensive, individualized sessions with you, okay, and can be put into the mainstream for few sessions, will not be able to manage everything, but for few sessions. Like in tier 2, you pull them out for a few sessions and most of the time they're in the class. Here it will be where you will have to maybe have a modified curriculum for them. Okay, so most of the time they are in the learning center studying with their learning support assistants. Okay, so it depends on the severity of their need. And then they're put into the mainstream in other activities where they can be a part of and feel successful. Okay, now here where the government has a lot of facilities and provisions, and now you see there's a lot of focus on making the society more inclusive. The focus is also on making education more inclusive for children, for everyone, and they're called the people of determination now. Okay, I know you've learned a lot, and for all those who have been, and this is the first, what do you need to learn more? There's a lot that you need to learn more, and every day we will learn more. Every day, in the sense, every session we will learn more, and you will be able to enhance your knowledge and understanding about SEN, inshallah. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. A few web links there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ma'am,
just the last one question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
The name of the movie, Nikki.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Tare Zameen Pe, I think. Not K, right? Tare Zameen Pe.
Aisha,
Please, can you type it there so that we can see?
excuse me,
Yeah.
Miss. Can you type the name of the movie you said we should watch, please?
Yeah, yeah.
Excuse me, Miss Aisha.
Hi, Miss.
Sorry, I'm doing that.
Miss Aisha.
Oh my God.
Miss Aisha. Please. Implementation assignments for those that has more one class one class. I have one class more. The assignments. When should I submit it?
You can submit it maybe after you're done. So if you can submit it this week, or you can submit it after you're done with the assignment.
But Miss Aisha, there are some questions in the assignments which is not in the course material, which we couldn't find in the course material. Should we use our own method or something?
You need to, yeah, you need to research everything. See, everything that is asked is there in the course material, taught to you in some way or the other. You won't find direct answers to questions.
Okay, miss.
Not where you look from the course material answer. You have to understand, reflect, and you need to share with me your understanding of it.
Okay,
So it's not
now I
something where you
understand.
look at the course material and you underline and like how we used to do it in our schools. Not
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Hi,
Yeah,
ma'am.
some
Visual
It's been
reflection.
yes. Hi, ma'am. This is Sobia here. It's been a long time. I would like to ask you. So later on, any personal questions I'll read out and see. Today, I think if you could suggest me some book on this processing memory. If you have any book that you could suggest me, that would really help me to understand you more better. That's what.
Okay. I cannot currently think of, but I will think of.
Yeah. Think of, and you can personally send it to Sally. I can get it from Sally. Yes.
Yeah. But you know what, Sobia, there have been a few suggestions and recommendations of books that you need to read already. You know, when you register, there are new names shared. Okay, and they have details on that. So just go through those. You can download them. They're all electronic copies, and you can read them.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, in there I didn't find the processing of memory as a book. That's what I thought. If you usually suggest many books, na, so I just add on to that.
Okay, I will see. Personally, I haven't read a book which was on processing, but I have something called, and I don't know if that's available. It's not available as an electronic copy, but I had something when I was studying special needs. There is this book written by learners.
Okay.
It's the Bible of Learning Disabilities. Okay. It's a thick book. I know it's very, very expensive. When we were studying back in my country, we had photocopied it because we couldn't afford to buy the book. But it's available. There's a new edition that's come up.
Only what I see unit 1. Don't even show unit 1 unit 1 and 2. So only what I see unit 1. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so thank you very much, all of you. Bye-bye. If you have any further questions, send it to Sally. She will share it with me and I can respond to it.
Ma'am, you had suggested for some book implementations on something, the title. You had suggested some book, ebook implementations on something.
Yeah, the implementation of the Dubai Inclusive Framework. That's the second one. So there's one is the Dubai Inclusive Framework 2017, and in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, there was another book that was launched that was implementation. So because a lot of schools had a lot of questions around the framework and how to implement it in schools, they launched the other one that helped us understand the first one better. Okay. Okay, then.
Email ID, please. And
your
number.
Your email ID,
I will ask Sally to share it. Okay, but only if it is an email that's important, send it to me. All assignments have to go to Sally. Okay, on that email address.
Ma'am, we have told her many times.
Anyway, we can get the replay of each Zoom meeting with you.
Sorry?
I said, is there any way we can get the replay of each Zoom meeting with you?
I think you will get, and all these questions are, please ask on the group. Okay, I need to jump out of this one and jump into another meeting. Okay, thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye, all of you.